Strap in, this is a long one. I'm a 23-year-old female, and this story is about a 33-year-old man. Let's name him Greg, who I met at a gym a year back. I used to go to the gym with my mother, and being an introvert, I very seldom used to engage with or even talk to people. Being in the gym since the last 2 years, I had seen Greg work out and never really caught him staring or even looking at me. He is a well-educated, well-spoken man, and I assume that interacting with him won't pose any threat to me. One day, Greg walks up to me at the gym and asks to add me on Facebook so he could promote some things regarding his business. I didn't think of it much as I am barely active on the platform and let him add me. Slowly our interactions grew in the gym as well as on social media. I was going through a rough patch, so I would often find myself looking for a friend or even more. From the very beginning, my mother did not like Greg because she felt that something was off about him. Nonetheless, I chose to meet him and another mutual friend of ours from the gym for coffee. I wasn't strongly romantic inclined towards Greg, but wasn't overly opposed to it. At coffee, our conversations were quite general, but on text Greg would casually flirt with him, but I would just ignore it. Big mistake. The more I spoke to Greg, the more I realized that I don't see any kind of future with him, even as a friend. Eventually, I started backing off and took longer and longer to reply to his texts. I did not want to blatantly snub him because we went to the same gym, and I wanted to avoid any hostility. Another big mistake. Greg also slowly backed off and we stopped talking. Fast forward 6 months, I got my dream job and posted about it on Facebook. Greg congratulated me and told me he's proud of me. I gave him the benefit of the doubt and started replying to his text. He again began making flirtatious remarks towards me, but this time I blatantly told him that this makes me uncomfortable and I don't want to be involved with him romantically or sexually. Subsequently, the conversations died down and we parted on cordial terms. He would text me, messaging me, and asking for feedback for some of his work regarding music, but I would generally ignore them. Now in July of this year, Greg messages asking for feedback, but with another message asking whether I would like to withdraw from his broadcast list for feedback. I respectfully told him that I would like to withdraw since I don't see myself as being qualified enough to giving appropriate feedback. He went off on the messages, most of which I did not understand. I asked for context and he told me that I am only getting that over call. I agreed to call. Another mistake. We spoke for 2 hours, wherein I made it very clear to him that I see him only as a friend, and if he wants to pursue anything more, he's barking up the wrong tree. He complied and was very respectful throughout. I assume that there is no harm in talking to him as a friend. For a couple of weeks, we spoke as friends and perhaps as future work partners for a music venture. I was hesitant and would shoot his invitations to meet down by making excuses. He was understanding and told me to take my time. After about 3 weeks of being friends, Greg comes clean about his intentions and lets me know that he is attracted to me. He began making sexual remarks towards me, which made me very uncomfortable, and I told him that now I don't feel comfortable to meet him since we are not on the same page. He was agitated but told me that if I wouldn't meet him, he doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I thought to myself, good riddance, as I was getting increasingly tired of him calling me every day and telling me about his inflated self-image. I told him that he will contact me after a year and we would meet then if I reconsider my feelings toward him. I obliged since I was growing impatient and just wanted him out of my life. I was off my phone that day for 6 to 7 hours. When I came online, I was welcomed with numerous missed calls and messages, some of which were threatening to nature. He threatened to show up at my house and hurt me and my family. This is when I realized that I may need to involve my family and the police. I told my parents the whole story. They did not immediately contact the police because these could just be empty threats from a man who doesn't take no for an answer. Following day, Greg bombarded my parents with threatening messages claiming he would abduct me if they won't marry him to me. We contacted the police. The police went to Greg's home to investigate, but seeing his behavior, he was on his roof half naked yelling obscenities. They declared him mentally unfit and told us he can't be arrested. We withdrew the complaint and contacted higher law authorities. While we were awaiting response, Greg allegedly committed a crime in a 5-star hotel. He assaulted a female employee and a guest with a knife and tried to molest the employee. Consequently, an FIR was filed, which led to Greg being admitted in a mental institution. He stayed there for a few days and now he walks free. We were able to find another complaint against him, which was taken more seriously this time. However, we were advised to not create a case against him, as he has not as much committed a crime against me and would easily get off on bail. So, he still roams free and still continues to contact me from unknown numbers once in a while, making me feel like I'm under constant threat outside my house. This happened to me years ago. I was about 18 or 19, living in downtown Chicago, originally from Northern California. But I had to come to live with my mom in Chicago and attend college. Roosevelt University, for anyone wondering. This particular day I was riding the L train, which I used to take everywhere because it literally goes anywhere in the city, and because I had no car. For those of you who are not familiar with the L train, it's basically the city's public train system. There are several different colored lines, and those lines take you to various parts of the city. I think I was on the blue or red line, going somewhere, I can't remember, but the event takes place downtown, and a lot of stops downtown are underground and tunnels. For reference, I am an African American female, and I often rode the train alone, whether to school, to meet up with friends, or just anywhere really. For those of you who know Chicago, it can be pretty rough with regards to the things you see on the train and the kinds of people you run into. So, here I am on the train, and we're going through all of the stops underground. I have my earphones in and minding my own business. At one particular stop, I want to say it was Jackson, a creepy dude got on the train. Again, this is Chicago, and at this point, I'd already seen many questionable people on the train on various occasions, but my attitude was always just mind my own business. So, this guy gets on the train. He's also African American. He's maybe about 6'2" to 6'3", and right away you could tell something was up with him. He looked really dirty. His skin looked like it was coated with dirt. His nails were super long. His hair was grown out all wildly and matted with dirt. He had some hair wraps tied around the head as like a headband, also dirty, and had this super long black trench coat with what looks similar to army fatigue boots and a dirty torn up backpack on his back. I looked up just to see who's getting on the train, which I'm sure most people do. And as he steps on, he immediately makes eye contact with me. I look away, back down at my phone. I personally don't like making eye contact with people. I get weird vibes. It makes me feel like they're going to try to talk to me. There are a decent amount of other people on our train car. He gets on and stares at me from the entire time he steps on to when he walks over and stands, holding onto a pole that's right across where I'm sitting. For a better visual, I was sitting on one of the seats that kind of sits in the middle and face directly the other set of seats directly across from me. So I'm somewhat facing him and he's standing. He stood across from me. Almost as soon as the doors close, he starts yelling at the top of his lungs a whole bunch of gibberish. You know, like some of the whacks that stand on the street corners with a megaphone yelling about how the world was going to end and we are all doomed. It was similar to that. He was just going on about nothing, but the entire time looking at me. It was so obvious he was focused on me that I caught a few people look at him and look at me, like basically noticing that he focused on me. Mid-rant, he stops and says, "Hey you black girl," out of pure reflex. I happen to look up, and of course he's talking to me. As I look up, he says, "Hi," with this creepy-ass smile and in this lower tone, creepy voice, completely opposite from the way he had just previously been screaming. I look back down at my phone and don't say anything. He then says something along the line of, "This is why you can't be nice to women, because they're all bitches." Now normally I am a pretty confrontational person. I usually don't tolerate disrespect, but I was also smart enough to know that you have to choose your battles wisely. And this guy was clearly off his rocker, so I had no intentions to entertain whatever he was playing at. He goes on to keep saying shit about me. Now he's screaming again, and people are just watching him berate me and minding my business, which is what we all do in uncertain situations. But I couldn't help wishing that someone would stand up for me, or at least another man tell this guy to back off. At this point, I turned my music back on and was trying to tune him out. But at the next stop, the people that were sitting on each side of me happened to get off the train. So he takes one of the seats next to me, sort of turns his body towards me and says, "Hi," again in that super creepy voice with that creepy smile. At this point, I'd had it, and it happened quick enough to where the doors were still open at the stop the people next to me had just gotten off at. Now he was too close to me, too close to my face, and I was incredibly uncomfortable. So I got off at that stop. It was about 3 to 4 stops to go until I got to where I was supposed to get off at, but I couldn't handle it. Obviously, no one was going to have my back, as everyone was just watching. So I decided to leave and try to get away from this guy, and then get back on the train to go where I needed to go. So I practically run off the train. There are tons of people going up the escalator on the ground floor, so I quickly run in between a crowd of people going up the escalator. My plan was to then walk around the top and get back on the escalator going down to the trains on the other side. I feel a sense of relief to have finally gotten away from this uncomfortable situation. And then I hear him in the way back of the crowd at the bottom of the escalator but heading up. He followed me. He got off to follow me. He was saying creepy shit like, "Oh, where'd she go? I'm gonna find you," in that creepy ass taunting voice. I was terrified, but I realized that he couldn't see me through the crowd of people because I was a bit ahead of him and ducking down. I got off the escalator and there was a Dunkin' Donuts in the corner of the street. I ran inside and ran into the bathroom. I stayed in the bathroom for about 20 minutes, terrified that maybe he wasn't gone yet, and I didn't want him to see where I had gone. I called my friend that I was meeting up with and told her what happened and where I was at. I wanted to stay on the phone with her a while. I walked back to the train, but since the stop I was at was underground, there was no signal. So I finally leave Dunkin' Donuts with her on the phone. As I'm getting ready to go back down to the trains, we make an agreement that if she doesn't hear from me in the next 20 minutes to call the police. Luckily I lost the guy, and I was able to get back on the train and get back to where I was trying to go. But I'll never forget that moment or that day. The scariest part of the whole experience was just realizing that no one would have helped me. This guy was clearly verbally abusing me. He clearly wasn't right in the mind. He was way bigger than I was, and was so obviously taunting me, even the point where he followed me off the train, and literally no one was going to do anything to help me. I can somewhat understand because Chicago is super dangerous in that way. And it's best to mind your business, that you don't get caught up in whatever danger is about to potentially happen. But it saddens me that that's the way things are there. It made me think about other young women. It made me think about other young women that may have been in that situation at some point, and some women who may not have been as lucky as I was. Especially the guy realized no one was going to help me, and he could get away with whatever his intentions were, in pure public. It was a creepy experience, and after that I started to carry a blade, some mace, and a taser. I'll be damned if I'm ever made to feel like that again. This is my first post here, and English isn't my first language, so sorry for mistakes and rambling in advance. So I just turned 18 a few weeks ago, and due to the pandemic and all, I wouldn't, or rather couldn't, throw a big party. I had two of my close friends over, let's call them Melissa and Clara. They both are 18 as well. We planned on having a fun evening in the night before I turned 18, and just make some fancy dinner and have some fun, and that's what we did. But we didn't have any alcohol. It's legal to drink beer and wine and stuff at 16, and hard liquor at 18 where I live. So when 12 o'clock rolled around, we celebrated some, and I unwrapped their gifts, one of which was one of those realistic looking seal plushies, which was kinda an in-joke because I went through a phase when I found fat seals incredibly adorable and got Instagram ads for those things all the time. Anyways, we were really hyped up at that point and decided to go for a walk with our music box and plushies at like 1 in the morning. Just for context, I live in a relatively small rural town, but it's next to a big lake, so we get a bunch of tourists in the summer, and we also have multiple clinics around, one for eating disorders, and there's also one rehab center, but it's usually really safe and quiet, especially at night. So we dance and sang along loudly on the empty streets and just having some fun with it. We pass a few people, but they all seem normal and nice. But generally, it's really empty and deserted in the streets. As we approached a big empty parking lot, which we needed to pass in order to get back to my home, I noticed a guy in a dark hooded pullover coming from the parking lot and crossing the street to the side we were walking on. We turned the music down as he passed, and he greeted us briefly in passing, as it's customary here in the countryside. We also greeted the other people we previously passed, and we greet him back. He looked to be in his mid-30s, but seemed totally non-threatening and normal to us at that point. We thought nothing more of it as we walked on and turned the music back up. Now in order to get to my home, we had to go through a small patch of woods where there were no street lights or houses nearby. As we start approaching the area a few minutes after we met the man, we suddenly started hearing talking behind us and realizing someone was walking like 10 meters behind us. At first we thought he was talking to someone on the phone, but as it was pretty dark, we couldn't see if that was the case. When we passed one of the last streetlights before the patch of woods, we realized that it was the same guy that had walked past us a few minutes before, who was walking in the opposite direction than us, and had to have turned around after he passed us in order to be right behind us now. That's when we really started to get creeped out. We also realized that he wasn't talking on the phone, but because of the loud music we had on, we couldn't make out what he was saying. So in the moment, I found a reason, figured it was a good idea to say, "I always have a knife with me," in a loud speaking tone to my friends. They later told me they actually bought it, when in reality we had nothing with us, in case we would have to defend ourselves. I kind of figured that maybe it would scare the guy off or something, but it sadly didn't. So there was one last house, which was actually an inn, that we would pass before I had to go in to the patch of woods. I said to my friends that maybe he was staying there, but we still agreed that if he kept following us after that point, it would be a coincidence, and he was indeed following us. In hindsight, we should have had turned around at that point and stayed in the well-lit and populated area. But I guess we weren't thinking clear, so we passed the inn and he was still following us. One of us turned their phone flashlight on, as there were no more street lights and it was pitch black where we were going. We kept turning around and checking if he was still behind us, each time increasing our walking speed more and more. until we were nearly running, but he kept getting closer and closer. My heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I was scared for my life. I kept thinking that he could have some kind of weapon with him or something. Then one of my friends, Melissa, stopped and turned around. Clara and me stood a few meters behind her. Immediately, the guy approached her, asking her if we had any alcohol or cigarettes. She answered in a totally sober tone that, in fact, didn't have anything with us. He took a few steps towards her, asking if we really didn't have anything with us we could give him. Melissa answered more firmly this time that we don't have anything. The guy really seemed desperate. At that point, Melissa said she was ready to kick him in the balls if he even took one more step closer to her. She actually does kickboxing and knows how to defend herself, but still, he was a grown man and probably had more power than an 18-year-old girl. Clara and me were just frozen and didn't know what to do and just kept standing there, saying nothing. He asked Melissa if we lived nearby or if we were here on vacation, to which she answered that we live in the area, as she figured it better if he thinks we know the area and the people well, and he wouldn't get any ideas. Luckily for us, after a few more times reassuring him that we also didn't have anything at home, I think the guy realized that he was gonna get nowhere with us and decided just to turn around and walk away the way we came from, leaving us half scared to death as we sped walk back to my house, glancing behind us every few seconds to check if he had decided to follow us home after all, which he luckily didn't. We arrived safely at home, still scared, and double-checked that I locked the door behind us. I couldn't really fall asleep that night, always thinking that I heard something outside. So, creepy grown man who decided to follow 3 18-year-old girls into the dark woods in the middle of the night to ask them for alcohol and cigarettes. What the heck were you thinking?